These are members of the Haganah, Palestine's Self-Defense Corps, dedicated to the proposition that they will never relinquish what they and their fellow Jews have created in the past 50 years. And to this land of Israel, they are sworn to bring their surviving brothers in Europe. But the struggle for Palestine today be seen against the background of its long and picturesque past. On this soil of Eretz Israel, in its blue waters and soft low-lying, the history of the Jew, a history that began here 4,000 years ago with the biblical promise of the Lord. Lift up thine eyes and look from the place where thou art. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. And the nation born of the seed of Abraham builded up the walls of Jerusalem, and when they were torn down by Assyria and Babylon, built them up again. And the land blossomed. The trees grew stately and strong, until the legions of Rome marched into Judea and cast its people forth. The Romans came and built their bridges. Invader followed invader. And when the last had left, the soil was sick from lack of care. Desolation was on the land. But Jerusalem was not forgotten. For 2,000 years, Israel remembered, wept for, prayed for Jerusalem. Scattered over the face of the earth, for 20 centuries the Jewish people longed for the return, waited to come home. And 60 years ago, when the return began, this is what they found. But they covered the denuded hills with trees and terraces, and built their quiet houses, and tended the starved earth until it bloomed again. Where only mud huts and disease had been, where sand dunes, swamp, and emptiness had been, they built new and shining cities. They built hospitals and power plants. And on the once desolate shores, desolate no longer, they lay down in peace beneath the warm Mediterranean sun. Yes, there was the prospect of peace for the Jews in Eretz Israel, peace on Galilee, cherished and hard-earned. And they cleaved to Palestine, to its water and its soil and its sky. For this was their land, and in it they found hope for a new creative life as a people. Palestine and all the world was at peace in this decade of the 1920s. But the 30s were still to come. With them they brought the clouds of persecution and then of war. And the Jews of Europe were alone and defenseless on a fearful sea where there were no ports save Palestine. Alone and defenseless, and Palestine the only hope. So they tore their hands on the barbed wire that surrounded them, and by the thousands to Palestine they came. The Jews of Palestine were ready for them. As the refugee ships approached the shores, they went out to meet them and to bid them welcome. One ship and a handful saved from the concentration camps, the gas chambers, and a little boat to lead them into port, a symbol of kinship between the builders of Palestine and those who were soon to share in their land and their work. This was one of the few ships, the blessed few, allowed to enter the great port of Haifa. For these, the darkness was soon to lift. A new, clear horizon lay ahead, and they remembered the biblical promise of the rainbow. I have set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And now the work begins. On this earth provided by the Jewish National Fund, a new colony will be built. The good red earth, carried away by rain and wind during 2,000 years of neglect, must first be cleared. 80 new colonies like this one being started here have been established since 1939 on land of the Jewish National Fund, which acquires and reclaims the soil of Palestine as the property of the Jewish people and places it at the disposal of the settlers. Now building materials are prepared from the rich and plentiful sands of Palestine. The houses may be of cement or of pale pink and yellow stone to keep them cool and clean. Or they may be of wood. The builders of Palestine, however, have had to be careful with their trees. For in the centuries when the country lay neglected, the great forests disappeared. But a program of reforestation has been sponsored by the Jewish National Fund. Millions of trees have been planted, and lumber for housing is now more plentiful. And now with our homes built, the earth is prepared for the sea. Tractors are provided by the Palestine Foundation Fund, and the soil is deeply plowed. Because the land has been lying fallow for so many centuries, it must be nurtured back to health. In the sandy areas, trees must be planted to keep the dunes from rolling in the wind. The ground must be leveled and fertilized. In other areas, such as the Jordan Valley, the soil must first be analyzed, then washed free of harmful salts, then nourished and analyzed and nourished again. And it means constant watchfulness, patient, grueling work. It means experimental stations and agricultural schools. It means that people who had come from the cities and towns of Europe, clerks, accountants, lawyers, must be taught to know the soil and to meet its problems, and must be taught to use the most modern scientific equipment upon which maximum productivity depends. The Jewish settlers quickly realized that they could not depend on Palestine's scanty rainfall to nourish their crops. And so they dug artesian wells and brought water out to the fields, at first in primitive water wagons. Laboriously, drop by drop, they watered the parched earth. Nothing was too much for them to do, for this was their land, and to nurture it, they would have carried water in cups from the remotest lake to the farthest desert. And soon the barren earth would look like this. They dug enough wells to irrigate 400,000 dunams of land. And in less than 60 years, a richly varied, expertly directed agricultural economy has emerged on a soil that had been a neglected, arid wasteland. There are great fields of cabbages, tomatoes, onions, cauliflower, eggplant, and squash. Vegetable output has multiplied 13 times over in 13 years. Production of potatoes has been so high that recently some have been used for cattle feed. And in the north, in Galilee, there is wheat and barley, corn and rye. But remember always that this is frontier life. Plagued by political intrigue, the Jewish settlers had to be constantly alert to dangers that threatened all the results of their long days of toil. But the dangers were faced and work resumed. They reaped their crops and gave their answer to danger and disappointments by growing twice as much wheat per acre as the land had yielded before they came. Jewish agriculture has three forms of social and economic organization. First, the moshav of Jim, or smallholders' village, where families lease their land from the Jewish National Fund and live in their own houses, but where most of the farming equipment is owned cooperatively and the produce is sold cooperatively. Second, the private farm, like any farm in Iowa or Minnesota. And last, the kibbutzah, the collective farm with no private property or private accounts. People live together and work for the common good. Of the total of 320 Jewish agricultural colonies, 222 of them, with a population of 100,000, are on land owned by the National Fund. This land is and must forever remain the property of the Jewish people, and must be worked only by those to whom it is leased. And they shall build houses and inhabit them, and they shall plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them. Now the early days of terrible hardship, of clearing the stones one by one, are over. There is time for gardening, and there is time for flowers. The fields are green, and for some at least, the ancient promise has been kept. Of all the products of Palestinian farming, fruit is the proudest achievement. There are grapes and bananas, citrus fruits of all kinds, and melons, apricots, mangoes, and papayas, pineapples and pears, fruits no one thought could thrive in Palestine. These things are of the land of Israel, redeemed by a dynamic Jewish pioneer who knows that growth is the meaning of life. And these are typical colonies, new and modern agricultural communities, monuments to the will of an unconquerable people. During the war, production of dairy and poultry products was increased by 50%, and this increase continues today. Dignity and security in the quiet countryside of the Jewish national home. And self-sufficiency in simple tasks that must be done when one is home. Nowhere in the world is the old so close to the new as in Palestine. For the Arabs here, time has stood still for century on century. % of the Arab population of Palestine lives on the land. And the average Arab, country and city dweller alike, has benefited as a result of the rebuilding of the Jewish homeland. Arab living conditions can and must be improved. And the best hope for the average Arab lies in cooperation with his Jewish neighbors in living and building together. In ancient beauty and Oriental tradition, the land is rich. But to the Arab villages can be brought all the advantages of modern sanitation and science. Old and picturesque are the ruins of ancient Palestine, and the customs of the Arab women here washing their clothes in the old city of Jerusalem. But if the old is picturesque, the new has its contribution to make. As a direct result of Jewish work in modern medicine and hygiene, the Arab population of Palestine has doubled since 1920. In the old city of Jerusalem, the Arabs trade their wares, their cakes and amber beads and embroidered kimonos. They bear their heavy burdens stoically amid the heat and the dust. Their water carried in goatskins, quite as if there were not a modern, gleaming city just outside the Jaffa Gate. The new city of Jerusalem, seat of Palestine's government, with its dignified and imposing buildings. Here in this city, the majority of the population is Jewish, and from it have come contributions to the culture of the world that make it more than a city of brick and mortar. Yes, this is a city of cultural, spiritual, and physical beauty. Miles away, across gleaming highways, lies the largest all-Jewish city in the world, Tel Aviv. Here, as recently as 1909, there were only shifting sand dunes. Here now, most of the commercial and industrial activity of Palestine is centered. The industrial production of Palestine has risen 100% since 1937. Palestinian Jews manufacture chemicals, metals, glassware, clothing, soap, cigarettes, and innumerable other products. At schools like this, the cultural, industrial, and physical training of Jewish youth is carried on. The Jewish educational system of Palestine has no superior in the world. Arab education is paid for by the government, and 70% of the government's money comes from taxes levied on the Jewish citizens of the country. But the Jews maintain their own public school system at their own cost, a system comprising more than 750 schools and 100,000 pupils. But it is an investment that counts, for it is an investment in the health, intelligence, and character of children who will be the citizens of the Jewish Commonwealth of tomorrow. These are children of elementary and high school age. When they leave their preparatory schools, they can look forward to attending the Hebrew Technical Institute in Haifa, the Herzliya Gymnasium in Tel Aviv, and the world-renowned Hebrew University on Jerusalem's Mount Scopus. Most of the Jewish colonies have their own nurseries where the children are given the most expert care. Medical care is offered freely to Arab as well as to Jewish children, and it has been shown that the various districts of Palestine have seen decreases in Muslim infant mortality in direct proportion to the proximity of Jewish settlements. The renaissance of the Hebrew language has brought cohesion to formerly polyglot communities which constitute Palestine Jewry today. Out of this cultural rebirth has come a great modern Hebrew literature and art. And as naturally as Hebrew has become the spoken tongue, so do the children love the land in which the future of their homeland is rooted. And so are the seasons of the year made meaningful as they celebrate the times of planting and of reaping crops. This is the festival of Tu B'Shvat, Palestine's Arbor Day, an annual occasion for planting trees, and in Hebrew tradition known as the New Year of Trees. Here the children are planting trees on land of the Jewish National Fund, in the name of children less fortunate than they, who wait to come to a country where they can live and grow and have their birthright of happiness. Yes, the west and parts of the north of Palestine have been made to blossom, and the land is bountiful. But now let us go to the south, to the Negev, where there are still great stretches of land entirely unreclaimed, barren, arid. 2 million Jews in Europe are in urgent need. They dream of the rainbow over Palestine, the patch of land at the end of it. And here that land lies, wasting, waiting. Here in the Negev, a few experimental colonies were established in 1943, and there is room for many more. Settlement life here in the Negev is simple and primitive, as in the early days of the now cultivated western and northern sections. The Negev comprises 45% of the area of Palestine, but only 4% of the population. Here it was on October the 6th, 1946, that 1,000 young Jews established 12 new colonies on National Fund land between dawn and dusk of a single day. 12 colonies in one day. And their names are now a chapter in the history of Palestine. Benaiah, Kedma, Galon, Shubal, Mishma HaNegev, Navatim, Hatzarim, Kuma, Be'eri, Padarom, Urim, Nirim. Yes, the cry of today's Palestinian pioneers is Ha-Negba, to the south. And the 12 new colonies established on 80,000 dunams of land reclaimed by the Jewish National Fund are only the beginning of what can and will be done here in the great open areas of the south. As the lamps are cleaned for the night, these settlers must still think of the dangers that the night brings with it. They have come to live in peace on land which is theirs, for they have learned that peace belongs only to those who are ready and able to defend it. And so each evening their horses are brought in to be kept safe against marauders. Their gate is closed against invaders, and the watch is set for the long, silent night. But there is ample proof that the Jew and the Arab Bedouin can live together in friendship and in peace. When the 12 new colonies were established in the Negev, Arabs nearby gave a cordial welcome to their Jewish neighbors. Palestine belongs to the future. The few dams and pipelines already constructed will one day be expanded into the Jordan Valley Authority, a great project formulated and approved by America's foremost irrigation experts. And millions of dunams of land in Palestine, now waste, can be made to flourish. And in the rush of the water from the head of the Jordan River down to the Dead Sea, there are possibilities for tremendous power, more than the great Norris Dam generates in Tennessee. Down to the lowlands, down to the dry lands, down to the lands bordering on the Dead Sea, the fresh waters of the Jordan can be brought by great irrigation canals. Over 1 billion kilowatts of hydroelectric power can be made available to light new homes, to turn the wheels of new industries. With the Jordan Valley Authority, another 4 million people can be accommodated in Palestine. What 700,000 Jews have accomplished here in the west and in the north of Palestine can be duplicated everywhere in the land. And surely people who have done so much with so little deserve the chance to continue their work, not only for themselves and for their brothers waiting to settle here, but for the great cultural and economic contribution they can make to all mankind.